Happy Boxing Day. I really don't like being this close to the camera, but the sun coming through the window is blinding. The wind's been blowing over trees all morning, and the streets are flooded with standing water. And now all of a sudden, the sun's coming out. Makes no sense, except that it's Western Washington. So, of course. I wanted to talk today about how all of my books and future books came to exist. And since the man loves credit so much for everything, and he wants praise so much, I'm going to give Trump partial credit for my books that are published and that will be. So I've always written fiction since I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I had always thought as a child I would be a writer for a living. That didn't come out to be the case. But I finally published. I had to self-publish, but I finally published for the first time in the year 2021. I had been writing a vampire story in 2008-9 that I ended up just dropping it because of reasons I don't need to talk about or want to get into, so I'm going to pick it back up. So, I think it was 2015, and I think it was after Trump had made fun of a disabled reporter. And I have a friend named Tom Schoblin, and I don't think anybody on this planet could hate Trump more than Tom Schoblin. And he had put up a post on Facebook that said basically, what Earth leveling event do you want to happen? Meteor? Gamma ray burst? What do you want? And I don't remember exactly what my response was, but I started thinking about, could something kill a lot of people? Man, this song's very distracting. Could something kill a lot of people, but not everybody? And make the Earth just kind of have to start from scratch, and humanity kind of have to start from scratch. And somebody had said Yellowstone, and it's like, no, I mean more on like global. I guess it would globally affect us, but something that's equal around the entire planet. And somebody said, hey, how about a big enough solar flare to disrupt the grid? That's all it would take, bring the grid down. And I was like, because what would we do without our electricity and computers? We would fall apart. Then, as I was developing the book, I was talking to this science geek guy, and he was saying, well, no, because we would be able to see it coming. Like, we would be able to see a solar flare of that magnitude coming in advance and could possibly try to do something to mitigate the damage. And I was like, well, how about if around the world, all at the same time, a bunch of EMPs were launched and bring down the global grid? Yeah, that sounds like, So then it started from there. And my first book was they called her Morlock. So basically, this woman who had traumatic life and was just addicted to going to work, but she worked at a brew pub. And then one day, she and her workmates were going on a short vacation in a state park. And when she got out of the van they went in, after they'd gone through the kiosk check-in thing and go into their cabin, when she got out of her vehicle, something compelled her to run. It was like a light in the sky, which it turned out to be a time wormhole. And she disappears into this light, and she wakes up 219 years later, and it's like Little House on the Prairie, because the grid had gone down in the year 2064. It's upside down, but 2064, that's why I have it tattooed on my arm. And she ends up thriving in that environment. and becoming a leader and healing from her traumas. Took me from 2016, I think, when I kind of started it, till the year 2021. Why I picked time travel. I've always liked time travel as a subject, but we had been watching that show Outlander, and I started thinking about how they portray Claire. And they're trying to portray her as a strong woman, that kind of abrasive like nature, the swearing, all of that, which I'm not saying that's not legitimate. But too often strong women are shown in that manner. But there are other ways to be strong women, which I'm trying to make each one of my main women characters a strong woman in a different way from the others. So once I got that book published, I thought I was just done publishing. I said I met my bucket list, right? One of my bucket list goals, publish. But then, lo and behold, Roe v. Wade overturned. I remember sitting for days just physically sick about it. And one day I was just sitting on the couch watching a news report about it, and the Primogenial was born. Bam. Just downloaded it in my brain like a ton of bricks dropping off the roof. Had the whole story. Had all the characters. And it was partially based on something I'd written like back in the Clinton area that I just made more mature. So the soldiers come back to war overseas, endless overseas wars that we're always involving ourselves in because we're warmongers, coming back too traumatized and too unable to function. And there was a period of time where all these ex-military type people were plotting against like CEOs. What just happened recently? Is it CEO? They were going and murdering or enacting plots to murder CEOs, Fortune 500. And so the government was like, well, we've got to figure out a way to make our soldiers more mentally tough, right? So then they don't come back and do crazy things like that. And one guy suggested, well, it's too bad that all our armed troops can't all be women, because as he says, and this becomes a great plot point toward the end, some of those bitches can kill someone without blinking an eye. And the guy's like, no, this country's not ready for an all-women military. So then there's this secret lab experiment place where they're going to make humans and program them to be physically strong, extremely intelligent, and lack emotions. Except there was one thing what kept going wrong in these incubator machines, which I didn't describe because I don't know anything much about science, so I just try to skip over as much of that as possible. But each time the infant was born out of the incubator machine, it had some kind of physical like mutation to where it couldn't blend into society. You know, that person would be rejected. And they tried it multiple times, always the same results. Finally, they just scrapped the project for the time being. They only kept the first Primogenial's the first, alive because he could be easily disguised. He had like weird hands and just one eye, like a cyclops. You could disguise that. No big. Kept him alive, and then they started like teaching him and kind of giving him a personality. And he was in the lab for 23 years, and then he requested to be put out on the outside just to see what would happen. And he was an language line interpreter, so he worked from home. He got taught by a trainer. This is how you invest in stocks. This is how you order food. You know, how get delivery. And for 5 years, he just did the same routine. And then the future baby mama knocks on his door requesting assistance with the flat. Then she is a lot older than he is. He's 28 and she's 46 when they meet. And she had never wanted children because of reasons. She had been a heroin addict. Her parents had exploited her, pimping her out to pageants and child acting and figure skating. And she had broken her foot and ended up, through what happens when people get on painkillers a lot, they end up getting addicted to them, and then they can't get that anymore, and they have to switch to street drugs. So that's what happened to her. She hadn't wanted children, but she wound up pregnant. Decided not to get an abortion. Had this child who was telekinetic. And there's like a B plot, which I won't get into it because this video is going to be way too long. But very, very powerful telekinetic kid who killed a bunch of bad guys by sounding every single alarm that she could possibly sound within a 5-mile radius. And then all of a sudden threw the sound into their bodies, and basically they boiled alive and died. She's 7 years old when she does this. At the end of the book, it's 6 months after the grid failure, and the survivalist colonies that they had always been preparing for doomsday, so they were surviving. And they were talking around the fire one night about how did all these terrorists that launched all these EMPs, why? How did they? So it would be like the elephant in the room. You'd see this. And the one guy says, nope, it was a telekinetic person. She did it by herself. She got recruited by these people that wanted society to collapse to make herself into an EMP and bring down the grid when she's like 40, however old she is, somewhere around 40. And the United States ceased to exist. Maybe you shouldn't play God. The kid that almost was aborted and wasn't is the one who destroyed the United States. Never was the United States again. That made me so damn happy to write. And it's kind of sloppily edited. I'm going to have to run another edit of that and upload it. And then, what had happened while I was writing the Primogenial, I had at some point come to a mental block, I guess. Writer's block, I guess is how you say it. And usually how I get over writer's block is this, to start writing something else. So I started writing this book called Thrice. Originally it was only called Thrice. And it had a completely different plot, which I allude to inside the one version that I did publish. Pretty much in a nutshell, these two people meet, Sebastian and Harlow. They're together in the original version of Thrice. They meet at Forelli's. They're together how many ever years? They're married, they get married and they're married for 3 years before Sebastian is murdered. Harlow completely falls apart and she winds up dying because of heartbreak. On his grave is where she dies. She's laying on his grave. And she hears him speaking to her. And here, you'll be born again, come find me. Then, here it is, just like the first time. It's her 12th birthday goes by. She wakes up from what she thinks is a dream, where all the previous memories of her personal life only, because she can't remember historical events because you can't change history. 50-something-year-old mentality downloads into her 12-year-old body, and she wakes up to be a 12-year-old who's a 50-year-old. If that ever happened to me, I would die, because that sounds horrific. So she has to wait until she's at least 18 to even get any autonomy from caretakers, authority, parents, or aunts, or whoever. All knowing why her childhood had been so horrible, and she's having to live it again as an adult mentally, and going to school as an adult mentally. I don't know. I might self-delete if that actually happened to me, because that just sounds horrible. She goes and finds Sebastian when she's 25. She had spoken to him through like some powers of witchcraft to say, don't marry your first wife. Just wait on me. And he does. But in doing that, he changes the course of events that he would have done, because he was supposed to marry the singer-songwriter, and they were going to go around touring together. He had been in a band called Thrice, as well as being an actor. But because he didn't marry the first wife, he didn't do the tour. He instead did more movie roles than he would have done. And he wound up on a set that had a radioactive prop nobody knew was radioactive. So he had it so close to himself during the filming of this, whatever this movie was, that years later he ends up with like some radiation-induced cancer, and he dies after 3 years of them being together. While he's on his deathbed, he tells Harlow, the only way it's going to work is if you come find me. I come find you next time. So I'll come find you the next time. It'll work the next time. And the thing that happened different the third time was that Harlow got switched at birth in the hospital and got raised with actually decent, nurturing parents who fostered her to have her dream of being a concert pianist. And then when Sebastian, the third time, when he's 16, he gets the brain download. He has to wait, because of their age difference, for several years before she's 18. Now, this is where it could potentially have been creepy, because a man that's 26 going to an 18-year-old, and he's been basically lying in wait for her to be a legal adult. Now, that could just be a creepy point in and of itself, but it fit within the context of the story. So he finds her, and they end up resurrecting band Thrice and playing together and blah, blah. I was about 100 pages into it when I realized it just wasn't anything really in my comfort zone. I was talking about too many things that were outside of my comfort zone, like kinks and like polyamory and just... And not only that, a lot of the people in this story were just useless. And I'm like, these people are just vapid. But what it caused me to do was to be able to move on from my writer's block, so I was able to finish the Primogenial, and I published it. And then one day I was going through Facebook, scroll, and I saw a meme of a man that was drowning, and everybody was standing around him watching him drown while they were recording it with their phones. Then it was like, just like the last time, the plot fell into my head for Thrice, A Peculiar Love Story. And I've already talked about that in my previous videos, what the plot of that ended up being. But anyway, circle back to Trump. If it hadn't been for Trump running for president and becoming president, I never would have written any of those books, because I wouldn't have had some need to like cope with what was happening in this world. The books are therapy for me. And I'm finally able to finish books and I'm finally able to make money off of them. But more importantly, because I don't make that much money, to put something out there that I hope someone gets something out of the books that I write, and I hope that it helps them some way cope. It's a story about hope, and it's a story about being a strong woman. And the next story is going to be called The Conscript. It's going to go back to the 23rd century, Little House on the Prairie-esque kind of atmosphere. But this guy gets conscripted. He was in my first book, Morlock, and I said he needs more page time. So I'm going to write a book about him specifically. And bringing back Serena from the first book. Make mention of her a little bit more. Every single book, I mention Trump. So he's getting his credit. We'll call him the fascist yam, the Cheeto, tangerine terrorist. I say everything but his name. I think somebody says 45. Anyway, so sorry I rambled on for 20 minutes, but I just wanted to have a Boxing Day video and talk about how weird sometimes things just come about that you never intended on doing and you never expected on doing, and then you do it 10 times over, because I've got a long list of books before my series is done. Everyone have a good one.